In early 2012, the City of Denver began enforcing a new land use regulation, Section 38-86.2 of its revised municipal code. This ordinance forbids unpermitted camping on any public or private property in the city. The code defines camping as simply dwelling temporarily in a place with shelter. Dwelling is defined as conducting such activities as eating, sleeping, or the storage of personal possessions. Shelter is defined as any tent, tarpaulin, lean-to, sleeping bag, bedroll, blankets, or any form of cover or protection from the elements other than clothing. Denver already has curfews that forbid camping in parks, zoning codes that forbid all manner of permanent or semi-permanent structures on private property. Further, the General Zoning Code limits dwelling activities to those carried out within structures that comply with the city's building codes. Therefore, the camping ban effectively eliminates every single place a person without a home might pause to rest, to dwell in the city. The ban obviously impacts people. However, I focus on something people produce: property. There is a rift between rights attached to human beings and rights attached to property. Essentially, it's as simple as this: land use codes are designed to ensure the enjoyment of property. They are not concerned with human beings. Their target is human behavior, behavior such as dwelling. Although my concern is homelessness, allow me to first consider the concept home. Is this a home? This? This? Does this seem like a private space? Is home a refuge, an architectural phenomenon, a social space, a personal feeling, a state of being in the world, or simply a vague sense of familiarity? I argue that people, irrespective of housing status, are active in producing and reproducing their personal worlds. They use symbols, space, language, and ritualized behaviors to define place and thus encase themselves in homes. This is essentially how Bachelard defines home. He sees home as a series of possessed things and spaces ingrained with layers of meaning through continual practice. Taking up Bachelard's use of the term possession leads me to property, the central concern of After the Ban. Real property is not a three-dimensional space, but rather a bundle of rights to this space. There are three types of rights constituting real property: the right to use a space, the right to exclude others from the space, and the right to transfer some or all of these rights to others. The legal production of real property roots in John Locke's labor theory of property, which goes like this: God owns the world, however, people own their labor. Therefore, if a person invests labor in a section of the world, like building a fence, draining a swamp, plowing a field, or building a structure, she creates property. Labor and property form the crux of this article. People worked hard to produce these structures. I argue that they also created what I term primitive property, a bundle of rights that accords them protection from the elements, ensures a level of privacy, and thus encases them in homes. These rights exist outside of legal discourses, outside of city, county, and state property regimes, and consequently outside of the formal means of their protection. However, they exist in the moral economy. Although tenuous, they are often recognized and thus sustained by the undomiciled and the domiciled alike. This, I argue, is a property regime. This article's cohesive chord is anarchy, which I define as social order existing outside of governmental regimes of order. If we're willing to think outside of the state, in other words, if we're willing to take an anarchistic view of human discourse and reconsider the products of this discourse, then, I argue, people living on the street, in putting up windbreaks, in carving out hidden private spaces in public places, in constructing and furnishing homes, conjure a type of real property. This article grew out of ethnographic fieldwork, including participant observation and narrative interviews. Guided by theories of property and anarchy, I relied on the voices of people dwelling on Denver's streets to propel my argument. There are complex economic relationships between housing policy, property law, and homelessness. Although primitive property is fragile, because it is woven beneath, between, and behind state apparatuses, it proves resilient, able to withstand emphatic disruption. By depriving people living on the street not only of the stability of home, but also the social power afforded by property, Denver's camping ban dismantles heterodox orders which decay from anarchy. I argue that cities should learn to recognize and work to shore up extant webs of reciprocity instead of running roughshod over them.